player will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. This is the Lucille character review. Wanted to take a couple days to get my thoughts together, but was released last week and already is showing some very promising results. And so today's review, pretty standard topics from what we normally cover, so we'll just jump right into things. The character overview, brand new lightning unit added to the game with the unique main job of Crown Princess of Ovis with the Grimoire Keeper and Supplicant Subjobs as well. She does equip staves as part of the Staff Devout group and also equips cloths, hats, and accessories with a move of 3, jump of 1 as a 100 cost unit and absolutely a 97 faith unit. She does have a max range of 5 squares away with 1 AoE and 2 single target scaling abilities in the main job. Overall resistances pretty low compared to what we're used to seeing, but 10% to slash, 5% to magic, 0% to pierce with a negative 5% to both strike and missile. Not the end of the world though. There's a lot that goes into her kit outside of just these resistances to keep her survivability up, but as a 97 faith unit you absolutely want to be cognizant of what you can be afflicted by from a status ailment perspective. And so 50% to stop, to immobilize, and 10% to sleep. I do like these. They're not the greatest, but they're very smart in terms of allowing her to at minimum operate against how some of these might affect her job and how she can perform on the battlefield. Now, from the mastery ability and 140 ability, they gave her a total of 400 cast time down on both types of casts, both the offensive and the supportive. They've given her 15 healing power and 20 crit evade and 15 unit res as well. I like everything they did between both the 140 and the mastery upgrade here. Now, from the base HP perspective, again, as a support unit, not terribly concerned on the stats overall. It's not as important. She doesn't really need all the different stats to perform optimally, but base HP is certainly at a very strong starting spot in terms of the broad scheme of the game. A little bit lower compared to where some of the newer characters are, but as a support unit, that's expected. But the rest of these stats, the base magic is certainly very strong here. The base agility might look a little underwhelming from a numbers perspective, but she's basically in line with most other units, and her overall agility does end up being relatively fast. We'll see why soon. The base dexterity also kind of pedestrian, but not a crit hit unit, nor is she really intended to be as a support unit. But the base luck is very strong here at that 192, far above that 75th percentile, right in line with where most of the 4th anniversary units end up. So this is a good thing to see. The overall total stat analysis, when we look at where things fall, overall no significant weaknesses here in my opinion. They give her a little extra HP on the board, 13 agility points on the board as well. I like what they did. Thumbs up for me. And so we look at some of these other metrics. Again, the overall agility when you equip the sub and main vision cards and also include her passive ability, she does end up in this upper tier of potential agility, which is where she'll reside 99% of the time. Very good thing for her. The crit hit, again, not a strong stat at all, but the crit avoidance is certainly among the highest in the game because of the 20% they give her on her mastery ability. From an accuracy perspective, this is definitely a weak point, but doesn't really matter because she's got a very strong guaranteed hit in the main kit that she'll use the majority of the time. And she's a support. She just needs to heal and cast buffs. The accuracy really is kind of a non-issue for many. And so the evasion, the last stat here, although technically on the gradient, lightning is not really tuned for high-end evasion, nor is really Staff Devout, so although mathematically she's competitive, I don't see this ever really happening in practice. And so we get to the report card here. Effective HP, I'm going with an A here, and a lot of this is just because of the natural power creep of total health pools in the game. 8 defense, she can get 15 AoE res in the passive. She's got that 15 unit res. Her weapon can also give her an 8% physical damage reduction. She's got 20 AoE wide res on her passive and 40 chain resistance as well. And the survivability is an A+ because she can give herself re-raise and the capability to seal re-raise on hit to herself and ally. 25% physical damage reduction. She's got a 50% general barrier. Depending on if you give her the bow tie or not, she can also apply to herself the 30% water res and her heal back capability, which not always the case. That's why it's in parentheses, but it is an option, so it's certainly part of the conversation. Her weapon gives her -5 hate. You can get more reductions to hate on her counter ability. That's also regen capable, and she can heal herself because she's a healer. So overall survivability, definitely an A+ from that regard. Now damage, C- here, not a penetration oriented unit. kind of limited for overall attack types. She does technically have an imperil, but it's not one you're going to be using all that often. I would not expect her to be a significant source of damage overall. The agility is an A minus. Looking at that 89 versus 82 when you consider passives, which she's going to have hers on almost the entire time. So overall agility, very happy with. The accuracy is really a D here. Mathematically, it's average, but in the power creep of the game, that might as well be bad. But she does have that guaranteed hit, which really solves all of that, so I'm not worried about that either. The evasion is a C minus. She's on the gradient of it, but not really a viable angle, as I mentioned. The movement's a D. She's got no move or jump capabilities, which is fine here. But the auto ease of use is really something that I think people are going to struggle with a little bit. I'm going with a D plus here because there are different things to consider for cast time math, for Truststone passive and equipment stacking, depending on which weapon you're using. There's hate and non-hate considerations in her buff rotation, which you kind of have to really do a lot of mocking to get it down perfectly. The optimal buff rotation even is a question where, do you use a TMR or not? Do you use the supplicant subjob or not? Which two units do you want to focus on? There's questions there. Even the accuracy levels, you want to guarantee that she's using that 100% hit chance and not missing enemies because of her inaccuracy on the diamond. So even then, you have to really think about what her total accuracy levels are. And you do need to have some vision card comfort in team building where she's a little bit atypical and off the beaten path from what you might normally use for not only A, what teams you're using, but B, what vision card support there is. So I think for most people, they're going to struggle a little bit in getting her to hit her ceiling. She's still going to be very good, but not to the hype level that many of us are talking about. And the game disruption is definitely an A. She is a hyper carry unit that goes great for anti-Joom teams. She will elevate all these top meta damage dealers to really be self-sufficient and far more effective on their own. By herself, she's not really that same kind of unit. She really does you require to have a veteran, mature account to really amplify that team you already have. But the game disruption is no doubt an A. The passive ability is also an A minus. Great passive options. The main one is real good. The counter abilities, I'm going with a B plus here. Not exceptional, but perfect for her. And the overall jobbing kit is an A. She just offers so much for support, for healing, for utility, for buffs. Almost everything is covered in the kit for a final grade of an A+. This unit can play and will play in every meta team for the next month and a half. She's very self-sufficient. She's an enormous support. Great element choice. Great job choice. Literally everything about her is very strong in terms of design. Going with a powerful A+ here. And so my general thoughts, again, we can go through all these individually, but it's the re-raise and seal, the select 2 that gives haste and a heal back to 2 teammates and allows them to dispel coverage on hit. That secondary buff there is absolutely immense upside for the team fight. She's got that large heal that's got 10 AP restore on it with the 30 elemental and regular chain res. The single target heal on her sub-job is also very strong, that it's a 310 mod with 200 CT up. And even the Supplicant subjob has a regen option on a select 2 that also gives him 20% damage up. So there's a lot to love there from the support. Even from the offensive capability, I say sneak attack because it catches you off guard sometimes where she'll have an opportunity to attack and she'll use this ability that's a piercing type ability, which means it can hit multiple enemies that has a 25% chance to disable. That disable can swing a fight immediately if you land it on the right unit. So really great mid-fight option there to weave some of that damage and randomness into your fight. Definitely more anti-physical in nature, though, than anti-magical. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why in terms of the resistances that she has and what she does for buffs overall. The only real anti-magic is just the 50% general barrier, which actually is relatively decent. I'm still okay with that, but she's definitely going to thrive more in a physical meta than she would in a magical meta. But it's not the end of the world. Her buffs are still strong enough that she is preferable in either. She's an exceptional Rainbow support, really doesn't need much resources to perform her job. There's some good cast time upside too for some flexible offensive AI. We will talk about that soon. And she's got smart curse AI as well. There's been some fights that if you have 2 teammates that are cursed, she will not waste turns trying to heal them. She will go on the offensive. And even if you have a cast that's channeled before your teammate gets cursed, as long as the channel is already happening, if your teammate gets cursed, she will still heal them, even though the curse has already been applied. Kind of little loophole there and how that interaction works. So in practice, curse is obviously a hard counter to her, but not making her completely useless, which is certainly a nice thing. Now for the new player thoughts, I'm going with a thumbs down and saying don't pull for a variety of reasons. But A, the lightning permanent pull units are pretty bad. The vision cards are also limited. The staff devout units, quite honestly, are also pretty bad. Even the vision cards, though, are good. I'm not looking at it from the angle of vision card support because she really doesn't need it. At the end of the day, what really matters is, are you already kind of playing with the meta, and if you are, then yes, she's going to push them forward. But if not, as a brand new overall player to the game, I think you can probably save your Viz for other permanent pool units like Joom, like Gilgamesh, maybe Cypher that's on the horizon here. But being a permanent pool unit means you can wait on her, so I would be a little more economical with your Viz as a newer player, that until your account's a little bit more mature, she's really not going to do much for you quite yet. But the passive abilities, this top one here is an absolute must. I did initially like the AoE res and crit evade, but I think I've since changed my mind that I think my second favorite one here is the decrease of skill activation times and the buff and debuff duration. I think this is the second best passive that I would keep on, and we'll look at that soon why in the cast time breakdown. But the penetration angle, I think the magic res pen here, if you wanted to use this as a second passive, is better than the spirit pen, not only for the extra magic percent, which certainly helps, but she does have a spirit in peril and a spirit pen buff already in the main job, so I don't think she needs any more of that. I would opt to go for the magic res pen in that regard. And so the counter abilities, I would just stick with this top one here. It's a 30% chance to decrease her hate and apply a regen to self. Certainly like that for a variety of different reasons. But the main job buffs here, this top one here absolutely is primo in that it's her general barrier to self. It gives 2 teammates haste. It gives them dispel courage on hit, so water resistance, and gives them a heal back when their health falls below a certain percent. If she is wearing bow tie though, and you don't have a tank in your team, she will use this on herself though, which I actually kind of like. I do like giving her haste early on in the fight. I do like giving herself a heal back that she doesn't have to worry about healing herself instead. Overall, I do like this, and even her self buff I like a lot. That 20% agility is certainly noteworthy, the 40 spirit pen, but more than anything, the extra 400 cast time down makes it so that almost everything in her kit, both curative and offensive, will be one tick, if not near instacast in nature. So really like this. The curative potential obviously is there. We talked about this heal earlier. I love the shape of this too. It's very versatile in terms of the range and height. 2 thumbs up for this cure ability. But the offensive abilities, this is really where things are also very smartly designed. Her main one here is the disable one. It's the piercing type that can go through multiple enemies. It's also smart because it's piercing that if there's a teammate in front of you, she will not use it, because she'll hit her teammate. So she'll opt to use a buff or a cure spell instead, which is very good for support AI. But there are also upsides here with obviously the Spirit in Peril being a good finisher late in the fight. But even this large diamond AoE, although her accuracy is pretty bad, there is an interesting angle to take here that if people are disabled, there's a higher modifier applied, that it has some AI tendencies to use this after you've already applied the disable. So I like the concept that they're going with here. 2 thumbs up, all honesty, in terms of how it functions. I would just worry about her spamming this AoE if the accuracy is not there to support it. So there's some consideration to be had. And the limit break, we've talked about this to death already in a variety of different ways. This is a re-raise and seal re-raise on hit, and 25% reduced physical damage, not only to her, but a teammate. So both of them have the opportunities to apply that re-raise seal. Very strong in that regard. And when we get to the sub-jobs here, I actually like the Princess of Ovis sub-job. This is a great single target heal ability, 310 modifier, the 200 CT. I don't love the second one here. I don't really think you're going to use it all that often, but the heal capability of this one, very, very big. But we talk about the cast times real quickly, and you have to consider there's 2 categories, right? There's the offensive ones, and then there's your support ones, because they have 2 different kinds. She's got the 400 innately, which means talking about the offensive ones first, that disable ability is 2 ticks and the AoE is 3 ticks. If you give yourself a Truststone passive of 200, that'll bring the AoE down to this 2 ticks. So it's not going to do anything for the disable one. So if you're just going for the disable breakpoint, this one doesn't really matter. But if you are using her job passive, which I told you I've come around to as of late, for another 200 down, that brings both of these down to 1 tick, which I think is very strong. Also keep in mind that even if you did neither of these things, neither the Truststone passive or the job passive, her self buff gets her to negative 400. So you can also get to this 200 cast time point by not doing those 2 things and only relying on the buff, or you could get her to virtually instacast by having either one of these and the buff, which would be the minus 1000 altogether. So there's a lot of ways to still get there, which is very, very nice and very flexible. From the curative potential, right now she's at 2 ticks for both of them, but if you add that job passive of the 200 down, that gets her large heal down to a 1 tick heal, which is another reason why I really like that job passive a lot. I think it's a big deal to make sure she gets that off in an appropriate amount of time before other enemies have the chance to attack your team. And again, the same argument here for that self buff of 400. Even if you took off that job passive and only used the self buff, both of these become one tick. So that self buff is really strong as a breakpoint for both of these. Now for the sub job, Grimoire Keeper, not going to spend a lot of time here. I think this one's okay, but I overall just think it's inferior to the curative potential of the sub job we already saw. And compared to the Supplicant, I just like this better because I like this select 2 of the regen and the 20% physical and magical damage. I've had great success using this as of late to apply these heal backs and the offensive potency. There is still technically a single target heal here with Prayer, although the potency is very bad. It's still better than nothing, I guess, to kind of weave into things, but I also like the select 2 here on the typeless attack. It's really just a question of the accuracy. But more than anything, I think this select 2 buff is really the best thing about the Supplicant sub job. And so the TMR review, I actually like this TMR a lot. I've tried to use it a little bit. I don't think it's going to be used frequently, but I do see it as one that I think has some good upside. Not only A, for the human res, that's really what separates this from any other TMR. There's a lot of magic buffing ones. That's not really all that special. But even the 2 agility here is really nice from a team building perspective. If you're doing some kind of agility tuning, that you have a new TMR that's got a kind of a unique niche agility value on it. So I do like this TMR a lot. It's not going to be used all the time, but I could certainly see some usage out of it. And now for the drop-based vision cards, don't need to spend a ton of time on this either because you're not really looking to support her a ton via vision cards. Now her best synergies are the spear, the greatsword, and the katana. No doubt about that. Sword Red Mage does have a lot in common as well, but really all you need to focus on is making sure she gets agility values somehow in the main slot and sub slot. So as long as you do that, I don't really think you have to worry too much about the rest of the synergy here overall. Now, for her Blood Prospector, that's unique equipment. That's the one that gives her the minus hate of 5 and the reduced physical damage of 8%. It's also the magic of 25%. This will not stack with the Truststone passive, though, which is why you have to be careful about how you overlap some of these sometimes. It's not the end of the world, but it's a complexity that many people don't like to have to deal with. I'm very comfortable with the magic build of this. I don't think you have to do any other build overall. And for the rest of the optimization, I think the Wizard Staff is really the only one I'm thinking of, but there's plenty of other equipments here to think about here, where the Survival Vest, the Thunder Ring, depending on the elemental matchup. I like the Balos smartphone a lot for what it has for the ailment resistance. The same thing for the Marshmallow, and that same reason. The Producer's Bow Tie I'm a big fan of for, having her buff herself, because she'll have the highest hate if you don't have a tank in the team. But even the pod accessories are still really good ones for her. And Esper-wise, I think Bahamut or Dark Siren are 2 of the overall general better ones, but at the end of the day, as a support, you just need to make sure she doesn't die. So whatever element res you need on your Esper, or whatever agility you need to make sure you get your buff rotation going properly, that's the Esper you roll with. So I wouldn't think too much on this either. And even the TMRs, there's some good ones here from a buff perspective, but I think the buffs on her job are good enough that you don't really need to look that deep into the TMRs. I think the Mashri TMR for the shields and the heal, and the Blessed Ribbon for the instacast heal are 2 decent ones. Otherwise, just go for some high agility ones or ones that are specific to your buff rotation. And finally, some of my favorite teams, the definitive one here is the Gilgamesh Sephiroth team. That's a top meta team now. I'm actually going to show the sample build for it in a moment. The idea is basically just that she just pumps both of them with buffs and cures and heals and re-raise on Gilgamesh that he does not have innately. And the team just kills everything. Really like that version. Even the version with Soul here tends to work really well against any kind of Gilgamesh teams where there's a lot of courage removal. The element matchup is certainly there. We've seen it in JP. This team has some decent success. It's not amazing, but it's certainly viable. The other ones here, I do like the combo with King Mont and King Bradley, where the Sword Knight overlap with her new vision card does have something there. I do think in a couple of weeks, Bradley's likely to be replaced by Cypher, which is basically just an upgrade of that team with the barrier break capability. And even Cypher does not have a courage or re-raise on himself, so she gives him a very valuable extra survivability tool. Same thing here with Cloud and Cypher on this 15 here, that Cloud could certainly use some healing or maybe some extra re-raise and re-raise seal. And even Shreka, the same idea, does not come with courage or re-raise herself. Charles is able to give that to her on the limit break. All of these teams are the strongest teams for the next month and a half, and she fits into all of them perfectly. Now finally, the sample build here. Again, the vision cards are very flexible by and large, but just putting together a team just to get an idea of some of the stats, it's really not all that strong, quite frankly, at first glance, but her strength, again, as a support, is not in the stats. It's in the job itself, and the job is amazing. But stat-wise, about 10,000 HP. She's not even past that threshold, actually. Only 1364 for magic, which honestly is fine. The healing power of 15 that she has innately certainly still helps her overall healing power, despite maybe a little bit lower than average magic stat there. Overall resistances I'm pretty okay with in terms of like these mid to low double digits. The chain resistance is really one of her staples to making sure that some of these mono greatsword teams don't just slash the heck out of her. Same with Gilgamesh and Sephiroth teams that have a lot of slash chaining potential. There's a ton of cast time reduction here. 45% debuff weakening is absolutely awesome to have here. Although the effective HP certainly doesn't seem like much at first glance, once you apply some of those survivability buffs to her, it gets a lot higher very quickly. And so stat-wise, maybe not terribly impressive, but it's not really supposed to be. So I'm overall okay with this. And then finally, the Truststone passives. This is one of the toughest things here because, again, as we saw, it relies so much on, are you using her weapon or the wizard rod? Is there a bow tie or no bow tie? Do you have the job passive on with the cast time down or not? That, I think, generally speaking, the 4 that I have listed here, non-italicized, are 4 you will always have on. Other than that, you can kind of play with the other ones of the lightning attack, the cast time reduction. They're a little more interchangeable with what builds you're going for. But other than that, on the left side, go for the defense set, the spirit set, the HP set, and I would stack up on status elements personally. I don't really think she needs a lot of the element resistances because obviously I just don't want her being status afflicted by anything that's currently running around in the game. But that's the Lucielle character review altogether. Again, a very good unit. A little more complex than maybe some of the ones that we're used to, but that does not make a unit a bad unit. And even if you don't get these things perfectly right, she's still a really good unit. It's just not going to be min-maxed to the ceiling. But for the average player, that really doesn't matter. And so overall, I'm very happy with the character they've created. I think Gumi was very creative and smart in what they did. I think she's going to be very effective here on Global. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to y'all later.